Hello everyone, happy February. I don't know what your February is like out there in the rest of the world, but here in San Francisco, we're having a very summery February at the moment. So it's really beautiful. There's a really fun, festive kind of anything can happen sort of summer nights vibe going on right now that I personally am really digging. So it's been a nice reprieve from the fog, which I also love, but happy February. For today's singing tip video, I wanted to do an addendum to our last video where we were talking about resonance and what it means to sing from a really resonant place in our voices. So we're gonna talk just a little bit again about that, and then I'm going to take you through a really quick sort of exercise. We're going to do some humming. Oh yes, thrilling, to kind of talk about feeling your resonance and what that means. Okay, so as we were saying, as we were kind of talking about in our last video, this idea of singing from a resonant place, there's sort of these three different buckets that I sort of divide the voice into, right? We have our breathing and our breath support. We have the vocal cords and the muscle tension of the vocal cords as they're sort of working with our airflow, resisting the airflow. There is such a thing as good resistance, which I'll talk about in a subsequent episode. And then the last piece, which is our resonating or our placement, right? And the resonance piece is so important because we are creating a sound down here in our throats, right? In our larynx and our voice box. But the sound needs to travel up here and then bounce off of what we call our resonators and articulators, okay? So resonators and articulators refer to these pieces that are resonance chambers, right? So thinking about tongue, teeth, lips, jaw, the palates on the roof of our mouth, right? Our noses and our nasal cavity and our sinuses, and then our foreheads, temples, top of the skull, like our, all of this, right? So kind of thinking of the sound is produced here, but we want to send it forward so that we're singing in our mask, right? Singing in our mask means singing in our face, right? So that we have this facial mask resonance, right? Where our sound is buzzing in here and bouncing off of all these different resonators and articulators to shape our sound, to shape our tone. And then that is traveling out of our mouths, obviously out into the rest of the room, right? So we talked again in our last video more about resonance. If you want a little refresher on that, please go back to the last singing tip video. I will talk about this more. I talk about it ad nauseum with my students, but I wanted to take you through a really kind of easy way to feel if you are singing from a resonant place or to feel your resonance or if you are not, right? And one way that I start to kind of introduce this concept to my students and get them to feel what resonance feels like is to get them to hum, right? So humming there's a couple different things going on with the hum. First of all, the hum is not gonna lie, right? If you really tune in to humming, you'll notice that there's a way in which you're humming and making your sound where it's gonna be really hard for you to get the sound out. You're gonna need to push and squeeze and it feels kind of trapped back here, or it's very centered in the belly and the throat. They're kind of working together, and that's what we don't want. And then there's another way to hum where it's really buzzing in the face and you can feel it kind of tickle your lips or tickle here around your nose or eyes or up, and you can feel some of the buzz here in your temples. And that's what we do want, right? So humming is going to be this very obvious way of checking in just with the kind of first pieces, the first two kind of buckets of our singing apparatus, and then adding a little bit in our third piece, the resonance and the placement, right? So the beginning of singing, we want to find a nice balance between our airflow and the muscle tension of our vocal cords, right? So those two things need to be working in concert with one another. We don't want to have too much air and be pushing too much air because that's going to give us a breathy sound or a strained sound where we're overblowing our air, right? So we don't want our air to be overwhelming our vocal cords. And conversely, we don't want to just be squeezing just kind of the vocal cords without a nice airflow, right? So that's kind of the first balance point. And I'll talk about that more in another video, right? There's always little splinters. And then the third piece is where we are singing from, right? Where we are placing our sound. And I've talked about that before as well. So this idea of where are we resonating from? A lot of the time people feel like they're singing from their throats because we feel the vibrations of singing there, right? Obviously it's a pretty intense sensation of feeling those vibrations here, right? But the first thing I always tell people is that you want to change how you're thinking of where your sound is coming from. You don't want to think of it coming from the throat. You don't want to think of it coming from the belly. None of this. You don't have a body anymore. You're just a floating head. And instead of thinking of our sound coming from here and like we need to push our bellies or push our breath to get our sound out or squeeze our throats or the little muscles right back in here, our little swallow muscles, right? Or the muscles of our neck. Instead of squeezing from there and there, we want to place it more here in our face, right? So one way to feel that is humming. So as you're humming, and if you can sit down at a keyboard, if you have a keyboard, or if you have a guitar or any instrument that you can play a note on, right? So you want to sit down, pick a comfortable note. I'm just going to pick one right now, and I'm going to hum a note. And there's two ways that I can hum it, right? So I can I'm just going to pick a nice kind of low chest voice note for myself. So I can hum like that. As I'm humming that, I'm really feeling like I'm exhaling out of my nose. I'm feeling the buzz around my lips, and I can feel like my sound is really traveling out of my body really effortlessly. I don't have to do a lot pushing from my belly or squeezing from here to get the sound out. I'm really picturing as I'm doing that, like I'm buzzing the sound off my lips, and that's a really important piece, okay? So doing a hum, like this. The other way I can hum, conversely, which is sort of the wrong way, is I can hum like this. And as you can probably see, I got a lot of tension in my jaw, my belly kind of pulled in, and I'm squeezing a little bit here, right? So as you're doing this, I want you to play a note and then try to hum it. And ask yourself, you can even look in the mirror to keep yourself honest, does it feel like the sound, is your belly getting involved? Are these little muscles back here around your throat, these little swallow muscles here, are these getting involved? Is your jaw tensing, right? And so kind of checking in with that. So I have a couple tips for a successful hum. I know you've never probably analyzed your hum this much, but I have a couple tips that can get you to hum in a place where you can feel your resonance, where you can feel the proper placement. So a couple sort of best practices as you're doing this. You want to make sure you're taking the proper inhale. So as you're inhaling, your belly's inflating. We don't want shoulders to go up, right? So that's always a good indication. So taking an inhale to your belly, coming right in, thinking of getting a little bit of that exhale out of the nose as you come in. So a little bit of a sometimes that can help activate the breath, I find, for people if they tend to hold their breath or they're tending to really push and squeeze their sound from their belly and their throat muscles. If you can get that little breath activation, imagine that there's like a little mirror in front of you and you have to kind of fog that mirror up with your breath from your nose. I think that's really helpful. So get that little breath activation, and then you want to try to feel that tickle of the pitch that you're making. You want to feel it sort of tickling and buzzing around your lips. You might feel it around, again, here what we call our mask area, which is our nose, sinuses, eyes, under the eyes. Or if you're doing a higher note, you might feel a buzz up here, a little bit of small pressure up here, right, where the sound is resonating. If you are not feeling that, if you've got the little breath activation out of the nose, the other thing you can try to do is pout your lips. So we're going to use Instagram to our advantage here. Everybody do your best duck face. I'm going to do one. We're going to feel ridiculous together. So do your best pouty duck face. Let me see those. Oh yeah, let me see those pursed lips. Oh yeah, yes, purse them. I love it. Yes, and I know you feel totally fucking stupid. That's fine. That's where we want to be. That's where we're growing. So purse your lips, right? And try to do it now. So why am I having you do this ridiculous pursed lip duck face Instagram look? So pursing your lips is going to release any tension in the jaw, right? And if you notice that when you release your lips and pout them a little bit more and let them relax, that you've relieved some jaw tension, then you're just gaining a little bit of awareness about, okay, maybe I carry some tension here in the jaw, okay? The third little tip that I have, if you're pouting your lips, if you're getting a little breath activation out of your nasal passages, and you still feel really checking in with these muscles right around here, and see if you're, if the sound feels like it's trapped back here, it is. And what you want to try to do is picture, and this is where we're going to go back to our sort of visualization piece that we've talked a lot about. You want to try to picture your sound. You can close your eyes if it helps you to visualize, but you want to picture that your sound is buzzing off of your lips. Okay, so you want to picture it's buzzing off the lips, it's buzzing off the two front teeth. And if you can picture placing it there, then you can sometimes lift out of here and get it forward, right? If it helps to do some neck stretches just to get that really relaxed, you can do that as well. I think the great thing, again, about the hum is it sort of doesn't lie. It's sort of similar to a lip trill in that if you're having trouble getting, you'll know if you're not placing it right, if you're having trouble getting the sound out. So playing around with humming, and then what you want to try to do is sing a scale, right? Or hum, singing the melody of a song if you're having trouble with it. And check in with yourself if your placement stays here in the front of your face and your mask, if you can keep it there, or if it's falling backwards. Okay, and what we're trying to do is keep it there. And so a couple of places you can check in with is your belly tightening in. Again, we want to keep that inflated. Are you tightening any of these muscles? Can you release them? Are you tight? Did your lips start to tighten as you went through the melody on a different note? Try to pout that. Are you holding your breath? Try to send it out, right? So kind of going through our little checklist. I know that's a lot to kind of think about, but go through each one. Again, looking in the mirror is really, really helpful, or recording yourself and just relying a little bit on kind of your intuition. Does it sound like you're holding your breath? Does it sound like maybe you're squeezing from back here? Does it sound like you're pushing your air, right? Does it sound like the sound is trapped back here? And kind of trying to rely on that and just really feeling that resonance. The last thing I will say about mask resonance before we end this little tip video is that the idea of singing from a really resonant place in our mask, typically when we describe it to people, I think it's confusing because it sounds like it should be a really intense sensation, when in fact it's not, right? So much of singing is we're not going for really intense physical sensations per se. A lot of it is much more mental, a lot more intuitive. It's sort of sensing where the sound is resonating. And I know that sounds like a bunch of sort of like hocus pocus mumbo jumbo, but if you can really sort of, again, go back to that idea of feeling where we're singing, feeling the pitch, feeling the placement, feeling where your sound is, and trying to experiment putting it in different places or sending it out in different places. You can always record yourself and listen back for a gut check, right? So I think, again, not focusing on the fact that it's not going to feel like a really intense sensation. It's going to be sort of a subtle sensation, but you'll notice if you're doing it correctly that it should feel really effortless. It should, it will kind of tickle and buzz in your face, which might be annoying for some people, which might be a reason that you kind of don't tend to sing from a resonant place. Maybe it just feels really annoying and you have to get used to that sensation of singing from a resonant free place. And then the third one, which again might seem kind of counterintuitive to people, is that it's going to feel maybe a little bit more out of your control. So when you're doing it correctly and you're singing from a resonant place, it might feel a little less in your control. Again, I will talk about this idea of control a lot more as we go, but allowing your voice to be out of your control is typically a good thing, right? That doesn't mean that we're going to let it be messy and we're not going to wield it in a clean, smooth way, but a lot of vocal problems stem from us trying to control our voices by physically manipulating to sing our notes. And what we need to do instead is learning how to sing from a little bit more of a relaxed, still place where all the pieces of the machinery are not working and moving, right? If everything is moving and getting involved, it's really hard to allow our voices to do the job that they're there to do, right? And so it's really my job as a teacher, and now your job as a student, and therefore a teacher of your own body, to identify the places where you're tensing and straining, and then getting you to sing and produce your sound in a more relaxed way, right? So learning how to produce the sound by not squeezing the belly, right? Learning how to produce the sound, not squeezing the throat. Learning how to produce the sound, and then you repeat it from just a different sort of way of going about the notes, right? So I would love if you can spend some time just humming some notes this week, playing around with that idea. I know it can be a little confusing at first for people. But again, kind of taking away the whole resonating piece and just sort of limiting it a little bit, I think is really helpful for feeling the vibrations of where we actually want it to be. As always, please send me messages or comments with questions. I love answering your nerdy vocal questions. And I will see you again soon, and we'll dive into one of these other topics. Okay, have a great week. Thanks so much. Bye.